Let's catch up with some quick Spurs news. And do the Spurs have to go all in on a super NBA megastar?
You are Locked On Spurs, your daily San Antonio Spurs podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, this is Hot Rod.
And I'm RC from the Cybertron Springs.
And you're listening to Locked On Spurs with Jeff Garcia.
Welcome back to Locked On Spurs. We're on the Locked On NBA Network. I'm your host, Jeff Garcia, Spurs writer for Ken's 5 San Antonio. Glad to have you all back. Hope everybody having a great week. And as always, we appreciate you listening to Locked On Spurs, wherever that may be, on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Ken's 5 Plus app. Pick a platform, we are there. And as always, you guys are the everydayers. Today's episode was brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Hey, what are we talking about today? I'm going to catch up with some quick Spurs news, mainly just the Austin events that are happening right now. Everybody knows Spurs play a pair of games in Austin, Texas. They're considered home games. So what is going on out there in Austin? I'll catch you up real quick on that. And then bring in our guest, Hector Ledesma with Ballys TV. We're going to be discussing, do the Spurs have to go all in on a super NBA megastar this season? Or what about just getting really good, solid NBA players? Discuss that and then get into some of your comments, the Locked On Spurs fans. What are y'all talking about over at the Locked On Spurs YouTube page? But first, as y'all know, this week is Spurs Week up in Austin, Texas. That's right. The Spurs are taking over the state capitol. There's a lot of things happening, so I just want to quickly update you on what's going on. All things start today. Today, all the events start. There'll be a Spurs Cup if you're in Austin, so write this down, at the Bolden Acres South. Starts at 5 p.m. Go there right now. Looks like a good, fun fan event. Now, other stuff happening. So on Thursday, there's going to be a South by Southwest community concert with Keldon Johnson. Again, if you're in Austin, you're going to this event, the Spurs Week. It's at the Auditorium Shores. Starts at 2 p.m. Keldon Johnson will arrive at 6:15 p.m. So that should be fun. See Keldon interacting with the Austin community. Of course, Spurs fans from Austin and San Antonio and all surrounding counties. And then on Friday, is the big event. That'll be the first game of 2 games in Austin. The Spurs will take on the defending NBA champs, Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets, come into the Moody Center to take on Wemby and the Spurs. Hey, Austin must be excited to see Wemby play in their own backyard. So a lot of fans will be coming in for that. But there's going to be a lot of other stuff going on, too. There's going to be community conversations with David Robinson. Again, that's at the Holdworth Center if you're in Austin, Texas. And, go check it out there. By the way, if you heard the conversation I had with the Spurs Vice President of Strategic Growth, Brandon James, he mentioned that if fans are out and about in Austin and wearing Spurs gear, you might get a surprise gift. So, keep an eye on that. So, obviously, that'll be the big event of the Denver and Spurs game. But, again, David Robinson giving back. And that's the one thing you also do. Understand this. It's not just games. The Spurs are going to be doing a lot of community outreach out in Austin. As mentioned, the community conversation with David Robinson. There's going to be a community park takeover with Devin Vassell on Friday. And that's at the Dove Springs Court. That's going to be that's on Saturday, Saturday community takeover with Devin Vassell at Dove Springs Court in Austin, Texas. Starts at 9 a.m. Devin will arrive at 1. And then there's going to be a Austin Spurs game. Yes, there's an Austin Spurs game. They'll be taking on the Capital City Go-Go at the Moody Center at 4 p.m. There'll be an Austin Spurs pregame chalk talk with Julian Champagny. And then it'll conclude on Sunday, March 17th, as the Spurs will host the Brooklyn Nets, out of the Moody Center. That starts at 6 p.m. There's going to be a lot of other things going on. That's just a quick and dirty rundown of what's going to happen. But other than that, go there. If you're going to be looking for some Austin games out in the state capitol, you're going to want to venture there, take part in all that is happening with the Spurs during Spurs Week. There's your quick rundown. All right, coming up next, we have Hector Ledesma. We're going to be discussing whether or not the Spurs have to go and swing for the fences. Do they have to bring in a mega all-star NBA player? Or what about just really good, solid players? We're discussing that. And, of course, your comments. That's next on Locked On Spurs. But first, I want to talk to you about PrizePicks. Hey, PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. The easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Look, it's just you against the numbers. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 players, their stat projections, and then you can start watching those winnings roll in. So, look, PrizePicks has a lot to offer. There's so much, in fact, that you're going to be swamped with all the fun you're going to have. But they got quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, an enormous selection of players and stat types. That's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Look, PrizePicks is simple to use, simple to play. You just make your picks, you submit them in less than 60 seconds, just a few taps, and you are done. Hey, they even offer Apple Pay. That's right, for quick and easy deposits. They have Apple Pay. They'll go right into your account this basketball season. And they got weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday, where they discount select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. Look, you got to check it out. Have fun with the Spurs all season long. Have fun with your favorite sports team with daily fantasy sports, and that is PrizePicks. So you want to go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA to use code LockedOnNBA. That'll get you a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's all lowercase, LockedOnNBA. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code LockedOnNBA. First deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. I also want to talk about Muslinger's Drive-Thru Coffee San Antonio. Go there right now. 2404 Thousand Oaks Drive, 281-1604 area. They're a proud local sponsor of Locked On Spurs, proud community member right here in San Antonio, and they love serving you delicious drinks all day from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Go there right now. Need a latte? They got it. Cold brew? Check. What about dairy alternative drinks? They got that too. Mini donuts? They got that as well. What about just drinks that are not too caffeinated? You want to take it a little easy on yourself? They got that too. Try the OG OJ. I highly recommend that. They have a new drink within their Red Bull infused Lightning Bolt series. I'm not going to tell you because you got to go there right now. But by the way, that's one of my favorite lines, the Red Bull infused Lightning Bolt series. Every time I go there, I always pick one up. They'll get your day going or keep your day going. So supercharged. Again, friendly staff, great menu, everything you need for a one-stop destination for all things coffee and drinks. Hey, try their Muslinger. That's their signature drink. Very delicious. Go to there right now, San Antonio, 2404 Thousand Oaks Drive, open every day from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Why? Because life is too short for a bland coffee.
This is Emily Swallow, and you are listening to Locked On Spurs with Jeff Garcia.
And we're now joined by my good friend. He is Hector Ledesma. Make sure to follow him on X at Hector Ledesma TV. Rocking the Syracuse cap, man. Always representing, huh, Hector?
You noticed it, huh, Jeff?
I did.
Yeah, sometimes like people will get thrown off by the block S, and I've heard people ask, "Is that Michigan State?" Yeah. Like even though it's orange or whatever, people just the shape and the font or whatever of the S. And people ask if it's Michigan State or something else, and so sometimes they'll get confused.
Well, to be fair for everybody, I've known Hector for years, so I already knew he went to Syracuse. so it's a little bit of a handicap for me. I got there. No, I'm surprised I didn't nerd out and say I was at the Superman S, but I did it.
There we go.
I did it. But you know what, Hector? If they do say that, just roll with it. Go, yes, of course, it's the Superman S. Yes, who do you think I am? I'm Superman. But he is Hector Ledesma. He writes for Clutch Points, and he also contributes to Ballys Sports. Hector, welcome back to Locked On Spurs.
Jeff, always a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You know, we got ourselves a good topic here. You know, you and I discussed this at the Spurs Houston game at the Frost, and you know, Hector, there's this idea. Well, Spurs fans, everybody, you know, pretty much all NBA talking heads are saying Spurs are on a timeline. They got to go get themselves marquee names. You hear names like Trae Young, go for it. Get that big name in here. Wemby needs a megastar, another superstar with him. But if you look at the available free agents for 2024, you know, there's a lot of just good quality, very, very good players. Hector, are we kind of getting mixed in the mix of this whole got to bring in a big name? We got to bring in a star. What if there's just really good, solid NBA veteran contributors that could actually help push this rebuild in the right direction? It doesn't have to be a megastar.
This is tough for me, Jeff, but if I have to land in one camp or the other, I probably land in the camp of expedite the process.
So
Get better people around Wemby sooner rather than later.
Okay.
Now, and that's what we'll probably do during your show right now, right? Is kind of like parse through the details, right? Like, does this guy fit? Well, how about that guy? But in general terms, while I don't think it's true that if the Spurs don't win a championship in the next 4 years, Wemby's going to bolt after that rookie contract. While I don't think that's true, I think you want to maximize every bit of this guy's career, right? And look, this is an unfair comparison, but it is what it is. We saw Timmy come through here, right? Heck, the other night, Pop alluded to, he's got that Tim quality in which been there, done that. It's ho-hum. It's that mindset of on to the next thing. It's inescapable, the whole Tim Duncan, and then when you go back a little bit longer to David, but the Tim thing is inescapable because of what Tim became and how Tim was a generational talent, what we think Wemby is going to be, right? So you can't help, especially from a Spurs perspective, but draw back on that. The Spurs won a title in Tim's second year. Now, in fairness, I'm not saying that the Spurs need to win a title next year. Let me step back a little bit. And I know when I said that, automatically people go, whoa, he wants people. He thinks the Spurs. No, I don't think and they won't win a championship next year. But in terms of on that progression, on that uphill climb, I think what we've seen from Vic this year leads them to believe that while he's not going to be the polished product that Tim was in year 2 when he led the Spurs to a championship, and certainly he's not as polished as Tim was as a rookie, he is good enough to where if you surround him with great quality people who are going to help him get there, as opposed to kind of the later Duncan years when it was just role players, make sure that the right mix is there. No, like he needs a 99, or it would benefit Vic to have a 99 version of David Robinson, that type of player alongside him, because that it goes in line with how quickly his progression is going, and how, because of that, how quickly the Spurs can be competitive again. And so when I look at this summer, I think it's a chance to make a splash. Whereas last summer was wait and see. This summer, I think, is an opportunity, and I would even say make it a priority to make a splash. And again, we can parse through the details of what that means. What is that splash? Well, we can talk about that. We can debate that. But I think that's where they need to be in terms of the mindset of this young phenom that the league hasn't seen before, and they have him here in San Antonio. There's just not another summer to waste, if you will.
Well, here's the thing. What if the whole stereotype of San Antonio, which is actually kind of true. No big names come to San Antonio, unless it's via trade. But as far as a free agent coming to San Antonio, you don't get to see that. But with the free agents out there, possible free agents, there's some big names. Some of them are on the back end of their career, maybe chasing that one title, like James Harden. I don't think the Spurs would chase James Harden. Right. But if the Spurs were to throw money, let's just say they could not net a deal with Atlanta to get Trae Young. And we know the Spurs have issues right now with addressing the point guard spot. So let's start off with that. Some names that are on the free agent list are Drew Holiday out of Boston. We mentioned James Harden. Yeah, who else we got here? Let me go through it real fast here. D'Angelo Russell, Westbrook, Tyus Jones, Trae Jones's brother, Mike Conley. If the Spurs are unable to get a Trae Young, for example, I wouldn't be mad at a Mike Conley, a steady veteran voice on this roster, this young roster, as you mentioned right now. So if they swing and miss with Trae Young and their consolation prize is Mike Conley, for example, I wouldn't be mad at that, Hector.
But that's the key, Jeff, is I think, you like Trae Young is the obvious name right now, right? Because of the linkage and the whole deal. And he's even kind of, how often he praises Vic.
Yeah.
But like outside of Trae Young, do any of those guys, Mike Conley at this point of his career included, you mentioned Tyus Jones, do any of those guys really move the needle that much? And I guess that's what I mean is this is a move the needle summer, right? Like while and I just said a little while ago, right? While no one expects, the expectation next year shouldn't be championship. Is it with Wemby now going into his second year? Is it realistic to think going into this summer with Wemby's second year ahead of him? Is it realistic to think this year we want to be a playoff contender, and so let's reshape the roster accordingly? Not a fringe play-in team, not like what the Rockets are doing this season, but a playoff contender. Like in mid-February at the All-Star break, we're a 5-6 seed at the worst. Like, is that the goal? You know, where do you see yourself being midway? What kind of a year in general do you see this next season being? And then as a result of that, where should you be come the midway point or the All-Star break of that second season? And so the guys you just named off, do they help you really get to that level? And so so the question then becomes, well, Hector, the Spurs aren't going to get Luka this summer, right? They're not
exactly.
They're not going to.
That ain't going to happen,
right? They're not going to get Giannis. They're not going to get Kevin Durant. Like, you know, now free agents, LeBron has a player option, right? So like that's forever going to be fun to talk about. But that therein lies for me the difficulty of this conversation is while Mike Conley and Tyus Jones, guys like that make you go, you know, you're not going to get. So when you say swing and miss for a Trae Young, do you almost have to hit and get a player like that? And you know, for all the naysayers and folks who say that wouldn't be a good pairing and it wouldn't work out because of Trae's deficiencies to this part of his game or that part of his game, you have to be willing to at least put someone like that around Wemby, especially this early in his career. Now, Wemby 8-9 years down the road, maybe all he needs is a bunch of role players and like another all-star type, like all-star fringe type player next to him. That's not where we are now. That's not where he is at this point of his career. Especially as he is, he could benefit from, you know, a guy who on his own could be either a 1 or a 1A option, or at the very least a very good 2 on his own team. On a contender, bring that guy in, and I think that helps give you that summer, that transitional summer that I think they need. They would like. I'm thinking they would like to have this.
Well, let me think. You're talking about pushing the needle. You know, look at some other names on the free agent market this upcoming season. Again, where the idea is if for some reason, you know, they can't net themselves either via a trade, you know, for a big name here. But I think a guy like OG Anunoby could help. Yeah. Imagine him and Wemby would be a nice little combo there. You know, for example, so we got Anunoby on that small forward list. You don't know, you know, what could happen to Keldon Johnson. You know, he seems to be, you know, the most tradable asset the Spurs have right now, at least on the roster end of things. DeMar DeRozan, Buddy Hield. There's a guy who's a sharpshooter. You know, the Spurs have struggled from the 3-line this season. Pop mentioned it, you know, in the loss versus Houston, saying, yeah, we didn't shoot the 3 ball in the first half, and that pretty much doomed us. So, is it going to be doom and gloom if they swing and miss either on a big marquee free agent name or via trade, but they bring in a Buddy Hield, for example, or an OG Anunoby? I think it's almost like, is that the consolation prize? But it's not that bad of a consolation prize. I mean, it's a good piece, you know, and I think a guy like OG could help push the rebuild.
He certainly could. And this is a kind of a fun aspect for me, and because they say that the past is prologue, right? A lot of times you hear the saying. Look at the Spurs with Robinson and Duncan and what they did early in those guys' careers. David's rookie year, they had already drafted him 2 years before, but the summer before David's rookie year, they bring in Terry Cummings and they trade Alvin Robertson, who it's easy to forget now, but back then it's like, oh my goodness, you're getting rid of the only player on your team who's really any good. Like, yes, they had David coming in, they had just drafted Sean Elliott, but Alvin Robertson was the only guy who was any good, and they traded him for Terry Cummings. They brought in Maurice Cheeks. Mo Cheeks halfway through that season ended up turning into Rod Strickland. They had a young Willie Anderson. They had Sean Elliott coming into the mix. They revamped that roster ahead of David's rookie year. In other words, they didn't take the wait and see approach with David. Now, that's a little bit of apples and oranges, right? Because when David came out, he was 24 years old. They had seen what he had done at Navy, and he was easily the best player in college basketball, and he was 2 years older, 2 years more mature. But they made a conscious effort that summer to reshape the roster so that David wasn't left with the same roster that had gone 21-61 the year before he got there. Tim, they go through his rookie year. What happens after his rookie year when they have that magnificent season, break their own record with David Robinson for the single season turnaround ever, and then go 2 rounds deep and push the Jazz, who ended up going to the finals that year, push the Jazz in Game 5, and Timmy gets the ankle hurt. But, they end up losing in 5, but a great rookie season for Tim. What do they do that offseason? They bring in a Jerome Kersey. They bring in a Steve Kerr. Yeah. They trade for an Antonio Daniels. They do the kinds of things leading up to 99 that after they gave Tim a year, after they had Tim, not gave Tim a year is the wrong word. After they gave themselves, the team, a year to see how Tim would progress, they then, start Malik Rose, another addition to that, in that summer leading up to the 99 season. The point being is they made a conscious effort to reshape that roster. Mario Elie, obviously a big addition leading to the 99, between 98 and 99. They reshaped the roster to believe, let's go all in now. And Tim was just in his second year. I mean, yes, he was rookie of the year and he was all pro and an NBA all-star, something that Wemby is not going to be, at least not first team all pro his rookie year. So again, a little bit of apples to oranges, but the past is there. What the Spurs have done with somewhat of a similar blueprint is there. It remains to be seen what they do this coming summer. And again, a lot of it has to do with what is available. So another aspect of that, Jeff, and talking about that is maybe they do it through trade, and I know that's veering off the conversation. That could be a conversation for another day, but another aspect, maybe the guy we're focusing on them bringing in is not on a list right now because he's on somebody's roster, and they make a deal and they're going to part, a la the summer of '89 when they parted with an Alvin Robertson. They'll part with a guy or two that, ideally they'd like to keep in the mix, but you part with that guy in order to bring in whomever it might be that comes in and helps you right away.
And maybe this summer's Alvin Robertson's could be Keldon Johnson. As mentioned, he's the most attractive, piece on the roster that at least a contending team would love to have coming off their bench. Team USA, at least it's a double figure scoring for his career. But nevertheless, Hector, I don't think it's completely doom and gloom if the Spurs swing and miss on a mega star name, either via trade or waiver or the free agency market or whatever. But I think, as you mentioned, if the past is teachable moments for this franchise, then perhaps Wemby does need that veteran. Tim Duncan needed a Jerome Kersey, to pair with, along him and Robinson, and a veteran guard like Steve Kerr, who won titles with Chicago. Perhaps they could use that as well, but still search for that megastar. Because, Hector, I don't think anybody's forgetting this team has how many draft picks? I mean, are you sure? Are you sure they don't just run the draft for the next few years? Their name called after another, and then the amount of cash they're sitting on, and of course, yes, the tradable assets on the roster. So, the Spurs can definitely make a big splash. Are you expecting a big splash this offseason? Like shockwave kind of moves this offseason? Yeah. Okay.
Yes. The simplest way to put it in, yes. And you know what, Jeff? I feel like, sometimes when we have conversations in the course of the discussion, we almost answer our own questions, right? Like sometimes inadvertently. Yeah. And so I feel like the questions you pose, I feel like you put yourself in a position right now to answer your own question. So let me ask you, if the Spurs go through this offseason and their two big moves are Mike Conley and Obi, Do you consider that a solid offseason, a good offseason?
I consider it a push in the right direction off season, but we're still not there yet. You know?
Okay.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. No, I hear. What
I
you're
would
saying.
consider that if at the end of the summer,
Yeah,
Spurs are entering training camp, and those moves or those type level moves are their biggest moves. I'm probably sitting here thinking they missed.
Yeah. I'm thinking my also thought is too the rebuild continues. That's my thought as well. The rebuild does continue. All right. Well, there you have.
That might be the most. I was just gonna say, Jeff, that might be the most succinct way I can put it. But again, I say that realizing that they're not going to enter next year's training camp with Luka and Kevin Durant flanking Wemby. That ain't gonna happen. So then what I'm having a hard time right now is what's the middle ground? If Conley and another, one-time all-star type guy or, fringe all-star type guy along, if those don't make a successful offseason, but obviously the other end is unrealistic, then what does define good?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We're not done talking all things silver and black. When we get back, we're going to be talking about you guys, the Locked On Spurs fans. You guys have been leaving a lot of comments. Fortunately, we can't get to all of them, but we're going to pick two, and we're going to give our reaction. Again, we are joined by Hector Ledesma, contributor for Ballys Sports, Spurs writer for Clutch Points. Follow him on X at Hector Ledesma TV. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started right now at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. And investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available only to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. And we're back right here on Locked On Spurs with Superman. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was Superman. That's Hector Ledesma. The S threw me off again, Hector. Sorry about that. There you
Superman
go.
S.
Superman S there.
The Syracuse S.
The Syracuse S, man. Yeah. He is a contributor for Ballys Sports and a writer for Clutch Sports, all things San Antonio Spurs. And so make sure to give him a follow on X at Hector Ledesma TV. Make sure you do that right now. You don't want to get Superman upset. Come on now. All right. So let's go ahead and address you guys, the Locked On Spurs fans. You guys have been leaving a lot of comments. Telling you every day I see more and more start piling up. I wish we could address all of them. I really do, but unfortunately we can't. But let's just say, Hector, a lot of them revolve around Mr. Devin Vassell's future in San Antonio. So let's start off with the first one here. Let me get it for you. Okay, I'm going to try my best to pronounce his name, but it's Lade Idier. So excuse me if I messed up that name, but Lade Idier comments, Hector. Well, first of all, his reaction to our last Locked On Spurs, where we're talking about has Vassell solidified himself as a 1-2 combo with Wemby, thus making him almost untouchable in the rebuild because you want to keep that pair going. So he replies with, no, it's not. Vassell needs to be a trade ASAP to get in a big player. We were talking about that a little while ago, plus draft picks. Thank you, Idir, for that comment. So, Hector, he's saying that no, Vassell hasn't done anything to solidify himself for the ongoing rebuild, that he's still tradable, and he figures that Vassell can at least net you a big player plus draft picks. Do you think Vassell is risen up to that untouchable level with Wemby?
Short answer, no.
Okay.
But let me split. Can I split his answer down the middle?
Go ahead.
When you're as bad as the Spurs have been this summer, and you have Wemby on your team, no one in general, no one is untradeable outside of Wemby, period.
Yeah.
Like there is no untouchable outside of Victor Wembanyama on the roster. That being said, if you want to categorize folks and even put them in that kind of classification, then yeah, Devin is the closest thing to untouchable. He is clearly their second best player. He has gotten better this season. He has gotten better as the season's gone along. I mean, if you look at his last couple of years, I did a story for Clutch Points about, I did it about a week and a half ago. And the story was essentially about how to that point, like for the last month, he had hit 20 points per game, like in every single, every one, but like 1 or 2 games. Since then, he didn't have the great game against the Rockets. He's still dealing with the hip issue. And going into that ball game, the only game in which he hadn't scored 20 in like his last 2 weeks was the game against Indiana when they played well and they shared and they won, and he got 17 and they played really, really well. So to me, that's more valuable. Scoring 17 in a win when you play really well against a team like Indiana is more valuable than scoring 22 in a loss, right? When you lose by 14 to a team that's not all that great. So point being, he's played really, really well. But just a simple notion of anybody being untouchable, no, outside of Wemby, it reminds me of the old story about, I forget the baseball player's name, but I mean, think like 50, 60 years ago, baseball player goes into his GM's office and he's like, hey, I hit, at the time this was great, like 35 home runs, 110 RBI for the season. My batting average was like 330. I had a great season. I want to raise. And the GM's like, we won like 80 games, this entire season. I can win 80 games without you. I don't need you to win 80 games, And so when the overall construct is that's the goal, is you need to improve the wins, then nobody on this team outside of Wemby is untouchable.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Vassell does come with a high sticker price if you're a team talking to San Antonio about getting Devin for sure. So right there, he's close. He was inching to that untouchable, kind of straddling the line when he had that string of great offensive games. But again, you mentioned, there were losses and whatnot. But yeah, again, thank you, Adir, for that comment. We appreciate it. Our final comment comes from Doja STL Robinson. Kind of going back to our first segment, Hector, about looking at pieces for the rebuild and pushing it for faster. He says, we need a starting point guard. We also need a lockdown perimeter defender. So kind of, I think a lot of Spurs fans see that, that they need a starting point guard, which bothers me to say that because I really like Trey Jones. I really do. But a lockdown perimeter defender, let's face it, sometimes opposition this season, Hector, have just run wild from the 3 line or the long ball shot, whatever. But what do you think about that? Do you think in this upcoming offseason, that is triage number one thing they got to address, the starting point guard and a lockdown perimeter defender?
I come from kind of a different point of view on this. I don't think point guard is as glaring a need as everybody thinks. I think inconsistency and a relative lack of talent is the biggest problem that they have, and their youth. The youth comes with the inconsistency and the fact that when I say lack of talent, like the talent is still budding, like relative to other teams that are more established and their talent's been around for longer. Everybody talks about the Trae Young thing, right? And because of how talented he is, and yes, he's made the comment, but he just kind of happens to play point guard. Like if that it's his talent and his ability and where he is in his career that to me that makes Trae Young more desirable than the fact that he actually plays point guard. Now, the fact that he plays point guard and he can get Wemby the ball in certain spots, and that's going to be a big part of his focus. Yes, obviously that plays into it. But if Trae Young happened to play power forward, and I know today it's tough to say that, right? Because it's more positionless. But if you happen to be a small forward, power forward, shooting guard, whatever, however you want to classify these days, it's still the fact that he's got Trae Young's talent, Trae Young's ability. That to me is the starting point, not the fact that he's a point guard.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can be successful with Trey Jones depending on the construct of the roster. The issue right now is the roster is young. Relatively speaking, the talent is not there compared to the other teams in the West, and they're inconsistent as all get out.
Oh, yeah.
And so those plague them, and really as a point guard, there's only so much you can do, especially if you're not. Well, Trey Jones is nice. He's not, a top 5 point guard in the league. And so when you put all those things together, I think it's easy to focus in on the point guard situation. But the reality is they don't. The Spurs, when you're playing them, they don't consistently come at you in a number of different ways. Yeah. It's either Wemby, it's either Vassell with Wemby doing his thing. It's either Keldon with Wemby doing his thing. It's it's either Sohan. It's never all together, and I say never because which is funny based on what I'm about to say. When they do, the few times they do is when you see the wins, and you see the wins against Oklahoma Cities and the Indianas, and that one against Minnesota more than a month ago. When they put it all together like that is when you see those moments. The problem is they don't put it all together like that as often, and so that's the biggest issue, more so than any one thing like a lack of a point guard or a lack of a lockdown defender.
Can you imagine this, Hector? They run it back. You imagine that? As Hector throws his chair out the window. No.
I know. Well, honestly, Jeff, they have no interest in running it back. I think to be fair, they this year number one was about. It was mainly about let's let Wemby be Wemby, and honestly, like as much as Pop said on Media Day, this year's more about winning. He meant that because now Wemby's in the mix. But truthfully, the most important thing was let's let Wemby be Wemby. Let's figure out where he likes to play. Let's let him adapt to the NBA, and then we'll go from there. The thinking along those lines being, let's see how these other guys who we think are budding and we think are going to step up and progress along their youth, let's see how they react and they kind of fit in. Well, I think it's fair to say the mix has been a little bit lacking in terms of wins and losses. Yeah. And so now knowing that, now having it given a year, they're not going to run it back, as they say. Yeah. Now, some people might define, all you did was add a Mike Conley. Some people might, and you added a top 10 draft pick. Some people might look at that and go, "You're running it back. That's your running it." But they're not planning on let's give this specific group another year with a high draft pick and see what happens. There's going to be changes. To what extent is the question? Yeah,
absolutely. And by the way, now they want to play a little bit more competitive. When now I'm cheering for lottery odds now. That's right now. Right. So they lost to Houston. I'm like, yay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, Jeff, it's taken us it's taken us till now to hit on it. That's going to matter. They're going to have another a chance to get a potentially a top 5 guy.
Yeah. I think right now, Hector, as of this recording, they're in the mix for a number one. Like they have a 7% shot at number one again. If they win like a couple more, that's when they start dropping, like their odds just drop considerably. So you got to keep that in mind. Like,
I mean,
they really want to win,
lottery picks, a potential top 5er, like,
I think at the rate they're going right now, and obviously this could change. There's still a few games left in the season, but the worst they can get is number 7 as of right now. Yeah. So we'll see how that shakes out. But again, hey, thank y'all for leaving your comments on the Locked On Spurs YouTube page. Continue doing that. Keep them coming. We'd love it. And we got to thank Hector. He took some time out of his busy schedule to join us here on Locked On Spurs to talk all things silver and black. Hector, what you got cooking, man? What's going on in your world?
Same with clutch points, pumping those out, including the weekend games of the weekend coming up in Austin. Still looking at the specifics of the coverage there, but at the very least, some coverage from Austin and a couple of write-ups as well, social media stuff as well. And then Spurs broadcasts on Ballys So yeah, looking at more Spurs. We only have a month of this left, right? A month before the regular season ends. So and then all the fun, basically what we're talking about now, it begins to dominate basically every day until late July.
And then we're gonna got Wemby playing in the Olympics, so that's gonna be something we're gonna keep an eye on. So a lot of stuff going on, even when the season's over. That's why you got to follow Hector on X at Hector Ledesma TV. Do that right now. Hey, we thank you for making Locked On Spurs your first listen every day. We appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow. Guest TBD. I gotta figure out who's gonna join us. So we'll get that all squared out to wrap up the week here at Locked On Spurs. And subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Ken's 5 Plus app. The list goes on and on. And again, check out Locked On Sports Today, 24/7 streaming YouTube channel only on YouTube. 24/7 Sports. Yeah, Locked On Sports Today. Go subscribe to it right now. So for Hector Superman, I gotta say it because that's stuff. And Ledesma, I am Jeff Garcia. We're gonna put a lock on this episode of Locked On Spurs.